For this next technique, you need a stamp with a large amount of bold, so places where the embossing pad is going to stick, a Versamark stamp pad, rock salt, it doesn't matter what brand as long as it has large crystals, 2 or 3 colours of Starburst sprays or Moonshadow Mist or Glitz Spritz, and some thick embossing powder. Now you could use some of the Lindy Stamp Gang embossing powders. You'll just get a pearly colour to the image rather than a clear image. And some water in a spritz bottle. First, ink up the stamp with the Versamark stamp pad and stamp down onto the cardstock. And sprinkling embossing powder over the entire image. Tapping off the excess, just pop that back into the bottle. Heat the embossing powder with a heat gun until it's just melted. So as you see that powder turn liquid, move the heat gun onto the next section. You can see this is all melted nicely and it's now gone glossy. Just give the card a quick spritz with water. You want this nice and wet. So I'm just going to start with the Starburst stain with the dabber cap, which is the Heliotrope Purple Plum. And I'm just going to dab this across the surface. Next I'm going to spray the Peony Scarlet Red. And finally I'm going to spray on a little of the Marigold Yellow Orange. Now for this particular technique the card needs to be quite wet, so what you want to do is move quite quickly. If it looks like it's starting to dry like it does on the edges here, just add a bit more water. This really needs to be saturated for this to work properly. I'm just grabbing some of the rock salt here and sprinkling this quite thickly over the surface of the card. So you need to get it over all of the card here. Once you've got this covered with rock salt, I'll see if I can zoom in here. There you go, completely covered with rock salt. Add a little bit more of the water. What you're trying to do is get some of the salt to dissolve and then recrystallize in the paper. So I would leave this either overnight or longer. My rock salt background has finally dried. It's winter here in Australia at the moment, so this took 2 days. It was agony to wait. The next step is to gently rub off all of the salt crystals. Once all of the salt crystals are gone, you can see that some areas have picked up more colour than others, and it just looks stunning. You'll have tiny salt crystals embedded in the paper, which just adds to the sparkle, and in my opinion it's just gorgeous. Now the next step is to make the image stand out a bit more clearly. I just use a wet baby wipe just to wipe over the embossing, which removes any of the Starburst stain colour that's clinging to it. This makes the central image stand out much more clearly, so it's a little bit easier to see and a little bit cleaner. Now you need to be careful at this point that you don't rub over the background too much, otherwise you can actually remove some of the sparkle and even some of the paper, as I've done just here. What you're left with at the end of this process is paper that acts and feels a lot like fabric. Because of this, the card can no longer be put through a paper trimmer, you'll need to use either a craft blade or scissors to cut the cardstock to size. On my finished card, I've mounted my shell panel onto some coordinating cardstock, decorated with a little ribbon, added one of the gorgeous fabulous filigrees from Lindy's Stamp Gang, that's the shell in the corner, which I've painted with the magical micas, popped on a few small beach shells, and that gorgeous little brass charm that I've coloured the word dream in on just to match. You can try this with paler colours for a different look. You won't get quite so much of the colour bleeding behind the embossing. You could also use some of the embossing powders from Lindy's Stamp Gang to give you a beautiful two-toned pearly effect in the background.